Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was late in the evening when the knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and truthfully, I was just about to settle in with a cup of tea after cleaning up the kitchen. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes even the sound of your own breath feel loud. My son had left earlier to spend the evening with friends, so I assumed it was him returning sooner than planned. But when I opened the door, it wasn't my son standing there. It was his friend. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The porch light cast a warm glow over his face, making him look younger than his years, yet there was something serious in his eyes. He called me Mrs. Turner in that polite way he always did, but his voice carried a heaviness I wasn't used to hearing from him. I invited him in, even though a part of me wondered why he had come alone. The moment he stepped inside, I noticed the way he kept glancing down, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. I made him sit at the kitchen table, the same table where countless conversations with my son had taken place. Talks about school, about friends, about life's small triumphs and frustrations. It struck me then how life has a way of pulling us into moments we never see coming. I poured him some tea, trying to ease the tension. The steam curled between us, filling the air with a faint aroma of chamomile. For a few moments, neither of us said much. The silence stretched thin, like a thread about to snap. Then he finally spoke, his words soft but weighted. I didn't know where else to go. That simple sentence cut through me. He was a boy I'd seen grow up alongside my son, always full of energy and laughter. To hear him speak with such gravity made me lean in closer, my heart tugged by a mother's instinct, even if he wasn't mine. He started sharing pieces of what he was carrying. His fears, the struggles he felt he couldn't tell anyone else, the sense of being lost despite appearing fine to the outside world. I listened, really listened, the way I'd want someone to do for my son if he were in the same position. The kitchen clock ticked in the background, marking each second as his words slowly poured out. At one point, his eyes brimmed with tears, but he quickly blinked them back, embarrassed by the display. I reassured him gently that it was all right, that sometimes speaking aloud what weighs on the heart can make it feel a little lighter. In that moment, I realized how often young people feel invisible in their struggles, even when surrounded by friends. He wasn't asking me for solutions, only for a safe place to be heard. And that night, my kitchen became that place. As he spoke, memories of my own youth surfaced, how I, too, had felt misunderstood, carrying burdens I thought no one else could possibly understand. The years had given me perspective, but the emotions he described felt familiar, echoing in the corners of my memory. It was as though his words bridged the gap between generations, reminding me of the universal thread of human vulnerability. When he finally finished, the tea had gone cold. He looked relieved, though still fragile, like a window just cleaned after a storm, the streaks still visible but the light shining through. I told him he was never a burden for knocking on my door, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do for one another is simply to listen. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the kitchen for a long while. His words lingered, settling into me like a story etched on the heart. I knew I wouldn't forget them. The next morning, the house felt different. There was a stillness, but not the same kind as the night before. It was as if the air itself carried the weight of what had been spoken at my kitchen table. I went about my chores as usual, folding laundry, making breakfast, watering the plants by the window. But my mind kept circling back to the look in his eyes, the way his words seemed to tremble even as he tried to steady them. When my son finally came home, cheerful and unaware of the previous night's visit, I found myself hesitating. Should I tell him his friend had come over? Should I share the things that were confided to me? I decided against it. Some stories are not ours to tell, and I knew the boy's trust in me depended on my silence. That afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang again. My heart skipped, part of me already knowing who it might be. When I opened the door, there he was once more. He offered a shy smile this time, less nervous than the night before, but still hesitant. I welcomed him in without question, and he sat at the same spot at the table as if it now belonged to him. We didn't rush into conversation. Instead, I served him a plate of food and encouraged him to eat. He seemed surprised, almost as though no one had thought to offer him such simple comfort in a while. Between bites, he began to open up again. His words painted a picture of pressures I had only glimpsed in my son's life, but never fully understood. Expectations from school, from home, from the world that told him he had to always be strong, always be fine, always be perfect. I watched him as he spoke, noticing the way his voice softened when he let down those walls. There was a sincerity in him, a kind of honesty that reminded me how difficult it is to admit our struggles, especially when we're young and afraid of being judged. He said something then that stayed with me. "I don't think anyone notices when I'm not okay." That struck me deeply. How many times in my own life had I felt the same? How many times had I walked into a room smiling while inside I was barely holding myself together? I realized, sitting across from him, that perhaps the greatest gift we can give another person is the assurance that they are seen, truly seen. As the evening drew on, we shifted from heavy truths to lighter conversation. He laughed once, a small, genuine laugh that seemed to surprise him. It filled the kitchen with warmth, breaking the weight of all that had been said. For a brief moment, he wasn't a boy lost in his troubles. He was just himself, young and alive and deserving of joy. Before he left, he thanked me again, his voice steadier now, as if our talks had begun to stitch something back together inside him. I told him my door would always be open, not just for him, but for anyone who needed it. After he walked away, I stood at the window, watching him disappear down the street. There was something in the way he carried himself, lighter, but still searching. And I thought to myself, sometimes the world changes not through grand gestures or monumental acts, but through quiet conversations at a kitchen table, where one heart chooses to listen to another. Days passed, and life moved in its ordinary rhythm, yet I found myself glancing at the door more often than usual, wondering if I'd hear another knock. My son remained blissfully unaware, caught up in the business of school and his circle of friends, while I carried the quiet knowledge of his friend's burden in the back of my mind. It was on a rainy evening, when the sky was heavy and the air smelled of wet earth, that the knock finally came again. I wasn't startled this time. Something in me had been waiting, preparing. When I opened the door, there he stood, drenched from the rain, his jacket soaked through. Without a word, I ushered him inside, grabbed a towel, and told him to sit near the heater. As he dried off, he looked around my living room, his eyes taking in the family photos on the wall, the books stacked neatly on the coffee table, the little signs of a home cared for with love. "It feels different here," he murmured, almost to himself. I asked him what he meant, and after a pause, he said, "Safe, like nothing bad can follow me in." Those words touched me more than he could know. To create a space where someone felt safe, wasn't that what every home should be? I brewed tea again, this time peppermint, the steam fogging up the windows as the rain tapped softly against the glass. He seemed calmer tonight, though I could sense the storm inside him hadn't fully passed. He began talking about dreams he once had, small ones, like wanting to play guitar, and bigger ones, like traveling far from this town, seeing the world beyond what he knew. But then his voice faltered. "I don't even know if I'll make it that far," he confessed. The way he said it made my heart ache, a quiet admission of doubt that no young person should carry. I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. I told him that everyone's path bends in unexpected ways, that what feels impossible today might become tomorrow's turning point. I reminded him that he mattered, even when he couldn't see it himself. His eyes met mine then, searching, as though he was testing the truth of my words against the weight of his fears. For a while, we just sat in silence, the only sounds the ticking of the old clock and the rain easing into a drizzle. I thought back to times in my own life when I'd needed someone to believe in me, to remind me I wasn't invisible. In him, I saw a reflection of my younger self, uncertain, longing for direction, but quietly resilient. Then something shifted. He spoke with more strength, as though saying his worries aloud had loosened their grip on him. He admitted how lonely he often felt, even in crowded rooms, and how carrying that loneliness made him feel heavier each day. I reached out and gently touched his hand, not in pity, but in reassurance. "You're not alone here," I said simply. The look on his face in that moment will never leave me. It wasn't relief exactly, but something close, like a weary traveler finally spotting a light in the distance. He nodded slowly, and though he said little else after that, the silence between us felt different now, less burdened, more like an unspoken understanding. When he finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped, the night air cool and fresh. At the door, he turned back and said, "I don't think I'll ever forget tonight." And then he walked away, his figure fading down the quiet street. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a long breath. His words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet house. And I knew deep down that this was only the beginning of something neither of us had expected, yet both of us needed. The days after that rainy night seemed to carry a softer weight. I went about my usual routines, but always with a lingering awareness that the conversation had left its mark on both of us. Sometimes, in the middle of folding clothes or stirring soup, I would hear his words echo back to me. "I don't think I'll ever forget tonight." And I believed him because I hadn't forgotten either. One Sunday afternoon, as sunlight poured through the curtains and painted golden patches across the floor, there was another knock. This time I opened the door with a calmness, already knowing who it would be. He stood there, not nervous, not rain-soaked, but steady. His expression carried something new, resolve. He asked if he could come in, and I welcomed him. We didn't sit at the kitchen table that day. Instead, we settled in the living room, where the afternoon light gave the room a warmth that felt almost sacred. He told me he didn't come to talk about burdens this time. He came to thank me. His voice was clearer than before, carrying a quiet strength. "I didn't realize how much I needed someone to listen," he said. "You make me feel like I mattered, and I don't think I've ever felt that way before." Those words tightened my throat, reminding me why simple acts, like listening, like offering a seat and a cup of tea, can mean more than grand gestures ever could. I told him I hadn't done anything extraordinary, only what I hoped someone would do for my own son if the need ever arose. He smiled then, a genuine smile, one that showed a hint of light returning to him. And in that moment, I felt proud, not for myself, but for him. Proud that he had found the courage to open up, and proud that he was slowly learning to carry his struggles differently. We spoke about lighter things afterward. He told me stories of his childhood, of times he had laughed so hard with my son that their stomachs ached. He even spoke of small hopes for the future, ideas he wanted to explore. There was a brightness in his tone I hadn't heard before, and it gave me peace to know he was beginning to see forward again. When the time came for him to leave, he stood by the door a little longer than usual. He thanked me once more, but this time there was no hesitation in his voice. Then he said something I will always remember. "You reminded me that I'm not invisible." After he walked away, I stood in the doorway for a long while, watching the late afternoon sun dip lower in the sky. My heart was full of gratitude for the unexpected connection, for the reminder that we all have the power to touch someone's life in ways we may never fully understand. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my home, I thought about how the world is often shaped not by grand, sweeping moments, but by quiet encounters, an unexpected knock, a cup of tea, a listening ear. His words, his courage, his trust, they all stayed with me, and they always will.